Here. Thank you.
They're in different.
Yeah.
It was suggested that we kick this down the road till later.
Oh, Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to. The first, and I said. Yeah, so this is Donald's other child. And this is Johnny. Right, right.
I was hoping to pop in. Okay, let me surprise you. Okay. And one is so, you're fine. We got a different. Don't know how it's gonna work out. Microphones. Tough for anybody. Microphones. You guys. Thank you.
No, this one has no cushion.
Yeah.
We're trying.
Right. Since the regular music. No recollection of that.
Yeah, but.
You can put it on, it's like a very, I don't know.
Are you presenting Eve tonight? Would you like to get
Phil, right here.
Tomorrow.
Oh, that's tomorrow. Okay, good.
I will.
But you don't have to be mentioned.
You haven't signed it, can you do so?
Lack of recourse.
Let's show up.
Steering committee meeting, but I have not got any.
It doesn't matter what it's called, usually it's fine. The other things that we do, you're going to with the forum. I hope you get better than that.
Huh?
You're getting so creative.
There is one chair sitting on this,
Right.
the armor chair.
Yeah, Dave,
No, I'm gonna be here.
for the front desk said he'd stop by around 10 to see if we needed more chairs or something as well. All right, I got 10 o'clock, let's get started. My name is David Singer. My name, Jose Jimenez. Okay, so my name is David Smith. Welcome to the March 5th, 6th session of the President's Council. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit different this morning. We understand there's a lot of speakers that want to talk on a specific subject. Y'all get time, no problem. But in order to make time for everything else on our agenda, this is my proposal, which I talked with a couple of council people about. We have a substantial discussion to do on the revision of the bylaws. And what I'm gonna do is take that off of this agenda. For a special meeting for 2 o'clock this afternoon for council members only, called work session in the conference room. We'll hash it out there, and next time we have a meeting, we'll bring back our thoughts to the group. It's just a work session. We're not gonna vote on anything or decide anything or spend any money. Is that okay with everybody? We'll just take that off the agenda and move it till 2 o'clock in the conference room, providing that the art and design committee has done their business by then. Thank you very much. Well, we'll do the best we can, but I do want the members of the council to get in there and have things to say today, and we don't pass the microphone around and get all conflicted with that. So, thank you.
Is there a missing member of the council?
Yes,
Oh,
yes. That's going to be Michelle. Kathy Kelly's not with us this morning. She's got business elsewhere, and I'll be taking her role. Wayne just did attendance for you, so we're good. Okay, that was my opening remarks. Does anybody at the front table have any opening remarks? Anybody at the front table have any opening remarks? And has everybody signed in? Do you need a chair, Beth?
there's chairs back
Yes, you need
here.
a chair.
There's chairs.
As a chair, let's go.
Some more chairs there.
We're civilized here. We'll try to- No remarks from anybody at the table. Okay, remarks from the audience. We'll call this our first year's session. Yakov with the microphone, please. Artie has. Yes, Artie has. Cell phones off, please.
Good morning, everyone. I was spoken to by Tom, and very quickly, I'll just say that the piglets are coming to play cards. And I was reminded, and they're playing other games too, in the game room. And it starts at 11:30 for how long, Tom?
Now,
an hour, 11:30 to 12:30. So if you're interested in talking and playing cards and other games with the seniors, I think the students from the college, right?
Everyone's talking.
No, well, I haven't met them,
The
Yeah.
High school students.
high school students, okay? They've been here before last year and early this week. So come to the game room at 11:30.
Give it to Rocco.
Next one.
No, my glasses on, I can't do anything. I'm Joe Sanders.
I don't.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you. Speak into the microphone.
Good morning, I'm Joe Sanders.
Okay, here I see.
Okay. I am very sorry to say that management appears to be trying to impose censorship on Woodland Pond residents. 2 days ago, Ina, Tamar, and I received an email telling us that all speakers at Shalom Space, residents as well as outsiders, must be pre-approved. That would mean all presenters, mostly residents, who speak for 10 minutes at Shalom Space every Friday before a discussion must be pre-approved. Woodland Pond's tax exemption as a nonprofit organization requires us to avoid promoting candidates who are running for office. But there is no election campaign happening now, and therefore no candidates. Residents presenting on Jewish history and culture have nothing to do with that anyway. There is nothing that could possibly jeopardize the tax exemption. When I objected, Michelle replied that, quote, the review extends to more than just the 501c3 issues. This encompasses a necessary, quote, sniff test on the qualifications of any speaker.
I'm sorry, what test?
Yes.
Sniff test, SNIFF. Qualifications of any
So I
speaker
want to
that
remind
is,
you of our 3-minute limit. You got 1 minute left.
okay, that is advertised for corporate compliance purposes. She did not specify what other corporate compliance issues could be involved. I certainly know of none. And why would management want a review of the qualifications of speakers at Shalom Space or any other forum? It is reasonable for management to require that outside speakers at times of electoral campaigns affirm that they will not promote candidates in Woodland Pond talks. It is not reasonable to go beyond that and limit that limited circumstance. I cannot imagine what problem could require this pre-approval of residents as the solution. I strongly object to management reserving to itself the power to approve or disapprove of residents' right to speak. Residents who pose no threat to our tax exemption. Upon moving here, we did not sign over the responsibility for what we hear, learn, and speak about to management.
That's time.
This attempted censorship is offensive and it must stop.
Thank you. I should say to the audience that Michelle is coming today.
Good.
And she and I should be here by 10:30. And she and I reviewed 4 issues of substance for her to speak on this morning. That is one of them.
Good. Is there a secretary who would like this statement?
Sure. There is a second. Others, any audience, please? Yeah, thank you, Ron.
Ronnie Jaffe, I would also agree with what Joe said. I think it is absolutely insulting for management to think that residents may or may not be able to speak to their peers about any subject. Mel is an expert and he has spoken on astronomy and physics and all kinds of things. We have all kinds of people who discuss things in current events and other groups. does that mean that they have to fill out a form and be approved? I mean, we all have come from quite experienced careers. And to think that any of us would say anything that would be objectionable is quite honestly very insulting. And I find this very offensive.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
I am very reluctant to. Who are you? Tamar Opler. I'm very reluctant to speak, but I also feel obliged to say what I'm going to say. What Michelle has said, she spoke about 501c3 and politics, but she went far beyond that. She said we have to also consider the comfort of residents and the sniff test. And I believe there were categories of experts and not enthusiasts and different categories where there was some demeaning of people who think they know something when they don't. Okay, my concern is that this go around is very different from the first one, and because of the elections and the new president throughout the country, organizations are stepping back or are stopping speakers or changing programs on their own before anything's taken from them. And I fear that this concern for good behavior and comfort and the ease of residents has a far deeper meaning given the time we live in. That perhaps Michelle just is being overcautious.
1 minute.
She may be being overcautious, but I think the result of it can be pretty damaging.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Joan Randall. I have in front of me a printout of the Internal Revenue Service guidelines for 501c3s. And I'm happy to share that with folks. The main statement is 501c3 organizations are absolutely prohibited from directly or indirectly participating in or intervening in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for elective office. Okay, so this is about candidates. And then there are exceptions and also a discussion of what bias could look like in terms of this. I consulted lawyers at an organization called the Alliance for Justice, and they clarified some of these things for me. But generally, the bottom line is that these are extraordinarily vague statements that the IRS has put out. They have never clarified what any of it means. And it can be used for, in general, intimidation, as Tamar has suggested. But the lawyers also affirmed that the IRS only rarely has gone after 501c3s. That's not really what they're interested in. That could change because there's a very broad and sloppy definition of what they're looking for. But the exceptions also include the desire of the IRS that in a democracy, people should be encouraged to be politically involved. So we're left with not a whole lot of very specific guidance. This is in direct contrast to what the Woodland Ponds lawyer has advised Michelle is the definition of and the prohibitions related to 501c3s. So we're in a very gray area for sure.
Thank you. Y'all go for another back there. Thank you.
Taylor Askew.
I just returned from an international peace conference in Istanbul, Turkey. And every breakout session I went to, I don't care what the original topic was, ended up being a discussion of the need for all of us all over the world, and particularly the United States. Yes, we did get very pointed looks and comments, to find spaces where people who have different opinions can come together, and because they have other things in common, have discussions and have talk about their differences, talk to each other and get to know each other. That is it seems like the clarion call for what may heal some of the rifts that we see around the world in society. And I feel like I live at Woodland Pond, where this is just baked in. We're all here, we have dinner together, we play Rummikub together. We know that some of our neighbors don't agree with us about some subjects politically, socially, I don't know, economically, whatever. But does not mean that we aren't friends and can't have discussions where we disagree and get along. And then I see what Michelle has written, and I feel like she is just going, that policy seems to me the exact opposite of what we are capable of doing here and what kind of example we are able to set in this community. And it just breaks my heart.
Thank you.
My name is William Taft. I don't understand why Michelle's coming later and not hearing these comments.
Because you're making them now.
I'm sorry?
You're making them now during a public portion of the,
And
Oh,
Michelle is listening to this?
no.
I find this not good procedure.
Would you rather I have stifled the discussion until she arrived?
Yes,
I didn't think
then
that was
I
in,
think
I
what we
didn't think
have,
that was in the spirit of what yours is for.
if you keep interrupting me,
Please go on.
thank you. What we now face is Michelle coming, saying what she wants to say, but the people who've raised questions here won't get a chance to talk with her and go back and forth. Is that correct?
No.
So that
No, it's not.
after she makes her remarks, people who've spoken will have a chance to interact with her. Is that correct?
That's how it's always worked, with her in the room, yes.
Excellent. I'm glad for the clarification. The other thing I wanted to say is that it seems to me, and people have said part of this, that as adults, we can have conversations without insulting each other. And I hope this continues always here at Woodland Pond. But that when a group sets up a speaker, other residents of Woodland Pond are free not to come to that if they think they don't want to hear it. So that people would be coming voluntarily to learn, to listen, to interact. And so to close this off, or to have to go through the hoops that people have described, seems to me to be wrong. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Yakov Ipman. I would suggest that a lot of the comments that we have made here get repeated so Michelle can hear them directly from the people that spoke. I know it's perhaps repetitive, because I have the impression that a lot of this process that was started when I was on the council, and I proposed in response to the initiative from Michelle that there is a speaker, invited speakers committee, and I made a motion. The motion was not to establish a committee that will approve or disapprove speakers. And I have that written down because I reprinted that to make sure. It was supposed to review what we have to see if there is any need to change the procedures about 501c3 and speakers in general from whatever manual, from the residents handbook, and then to recommend something if needed. Unfortunately, this whole process took a dynamic of its own. And things, we spent probably 3 or 4 council meetings trying to correct this word or that word in this sentence or that sentence, which in a part that was basically establishing the censorship committee. And that was against this spirit of what I proposed.
1 minute.
And now, when I retracted the proposal on November, because I heard from all the people, both in the audience and the council, and everybody was extremely upset. I don't know if all that translated and got directed, so Michelle was aware of all that. As a result, she interpreted that the council decided we are not going to have that committee and let management handle the whole process, which includes, in my view, also establishing a censorship committee.
Thank you. Any more? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I got it, Mike.
Larry Randall, what I have to say is short and not at all sweet. Most of us can recall living through the late 40s, early 50s. Sounds to me like what is being proposed here is that management will have an approved list of speakers. What is the opposite of that? Blacklist.
Thank you.
Okay. For that. Okay, we got about 10 minutes before Michelle arrives. We'll try to get through some of the business portion. The council is now in session. Yakov, please. Thank you. Thanks for your help. I'm sure they're needing you later.
Sure.
Can we do the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, February 20th? Second. Get that. Okay. Discussion? Okay. All in favor? All right, Carl, you voting on the minutes? Thank you. Communications and receive, Larry?
No communications were received in writing by way of the copy. I did receive one communication via our council email list. That was from Dick Barry informing us, the council, of the fact that the governing committee and the board had approved for membership on the board 2 residents, namely Tom Gilder and Ina Podorf. And I duly sent that out to all members of the board. Excuse, to the council, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Old business. The first one on here is the revision of the bylaws. We've agreed to move that to 2 o'clock in the conference room. The audience can come or not come. There's not going to be anything decided. It's going to be a work session where hopefully we can test our reactions to the proposed amendments to the bylaws. Tom and Larry and I, as well as Kathy Kelgan, working on this, and we've shared the draft with the committee members. We hope to have something a little more definitive for you all the next time we meet, which would be March 20th. Tom, any remarks and review of the Residents Association meeting? I know you have something for us, and I'm also saying Michelle's going to speak on the communications side later.
Yes, it was well attended, and I thank you all for coming. Again, the purpose of it was really to reinforce to all residents, there is a way that you can be communicated with that you would prefer. I had discovered there's 27 different techniques that can be used to get information around. There needs to be a look at what is the source, the proper golden source of information. And I understand Michelle may have an update for us on that today, but just to let you know that your survey and the response from the presentations were good and give us focus where we want to go.
It is? Okay, thank you. We'll do our committee reviews now. I got a couple things to say. I hope everybody's got something for Molly in writing for their reports. It doesn't have to be extensive, but I would like some bullet points to make sure minute taking easy. I would like to limit these reports to highlights, something that is happening or pending or about to affect us, and remind liaisons and council members that being a liaison is often a two-way street. We bring information back from the committees, but sometimes the committees seek information from us. Case in point, the Finance Review Committee early this week, a subject was under discussion. Tom, being alert to what the council was up to, was able to help that discussion a little bit. So don't be afraid to take information to your committees as well. I think they'd appreciate it. I'm going to start, pass the microphone over to Carl, and we just work our way around the room.
Okay, on the health committee, a lot of things, I'm gonna just cut it down to 2 items for time's sake. One of them is an action item. One was that Dr. Patel's availability should be better known. Apparently, he is still able to accept new patients from independent living. And perhaps that should be noted in the Chanticleer or in some manner. But the action item is on the question of who votes for council in the health center and what the procedure is. It has been a sort of loose procedure.
Carl, I thought you said we were going to hold off on this one.
I hadn't said it. I'm quite willing to hold off on it.
Yeah, if we could, because you said it wasn't time sensitive, is what I thought I got from the
Correct.
email. Yeah.
That's well, except that I'm supposed to bring a report back to the next meeting. But so I can say we're tabled.
Yeah, but it's, send out a note that what the specifics are, so we can have a good discussion next time, please.
Okay, the issue that I really want clarified, one of the issues that maybe one of you knows, are they still accepting people in the health center who are not members of the association? The residents?
That's not a question anybody at the table is qualified to answer. That'd be a
Okay, so I'll have
a follow-up question, I would say, more than anybody else.
Mhm. Okay, that's it.
Questions for Carl? Okay. You also have the physical plant, Carl?
Yes. The pool pack is turned on. They're still waiting for parts. It should be turned on today. And it could take, he hopes to have the pool open on Monday. A lot of talk about parts and the difficulty of getting parts for things. So work that we think will be done quickly isn't always done quickly because so many parts are not available right away. Tom is very happy having those office hours twice a month. He sits there in the classroom and there've actually been lines of people waiting to talk to him, so that'll continue. The kitchen coolers, all the
Excuse me,
work,
Carl. Erwin, could you get the door, please? Thank you.
yeah, work has been completed there. Elevator problems. Something went wrong with the door closer. We were told we needed a new one, but they managed to replace the old one. And in the process, Tom was not satisfied with the service we're getting from Otis Elevators. So he's considering changing to another company. And by the way, we pay Otis $9,000 a month to stand by. The attic sprinklers are almost finished. And it was done purely to save money on insurance costs. It'll take us about 5 years to pay off to all the work that it's cost to do it in terms of savings on insurance. That's it.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Carl?
Carl, at the meeting, what Tom calls his workshop, chat is going to be on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month, remember, because he wanted to avoid conflicting with the residents' physical plant meeting, okay?
Edwin, you didn't have anything you said? No, you either?
A little bit.
The landscape committee, will meet later this month, so I have nothing to say about that. Art and design did have an unscheduled informal meeting, which is difficult to keep track of subjects, because there was, no agenda. However, one thing did take place of importance. John Ortner completed his vision statement, actually the committee's vision statement, which I will pass, to our recording secretary, but not ask her to distribute it to everybody. It's kind of, it's kind of complicated, but it will be there for anybody, to read if they so desire. Outside of that, I have nothing else.
The dining committee met on March 4th. The new seating times go into effect today. You will make reservations at 15-minute intervals. Rolls will be limited now to walnut, raisin, and seeded, and you will order them with your drinks, and they will appear on the table in a basket. I don't know quite when that's going to start. There was a big discussion about how to deal with the potential limitation of dining services during the renovation. And this included offering incentives for pickup and or delivery, and possibly temporarily opting out from dining. The new 5-week cycle goes into effect, I think, in later April. Menus will be printed on larger sized paper, and so that the font will be bigger and more information can get on the form. And much thought is being given to how to cover the cost of the new 3-part reusable containers, and that will be brought out during Earth Week for people's information. And there'll be some major discussions about how to deal with the financing of that. And sustainability will lead to later.
All right, anything for June, we'll close up the dining report. Okay, so welcome, Michelle. As anticipated, the year's session was focused on the speaker series, and I said we'd have that as an item discussion, but you and I talked about having 3 other items. What we're gonna try and do, these other items are more informational than action, if you will. And I'd like Michelle to give us an update on these 3, maybe about 5 minutes, including a Q&A, and then we can have the rest of your time on the issue that you're most of you are here for. So let me get to my list. First one is the implementation of the new procedure for closing the doors once a meeting starts in some of the larger meeting rooms. You and I talked a little bit about this yesterday. I sense that there's some movement. You'd like to stop this for a while or change it, or I may have misread you, but please speak to it.
Right, so Jason suggested this came from Jason, who, as everybody knows, his department handles all of the setups, both from a physical perspective and also the AV. And he had suggested, and I 100% agreed with it, that when we have large meetings, once the meeting starts, I think the door should be closed and there should be a sign put up that says, meeting closed or whatever. Because the problem is, and we see this a lot, is it's very disruptive when people come and go once the speaker has started. It's very distracting for the speaker. It's very distracting for the residents. I think it's a normal expectation of any place that you go, that if you're going to an event, that you be there when it starts or you don't come. This isn't necessarily intended to apply to everything, but where Jason was kind of thinking it should apply is definitely like big things in the pack where we have a full house. Especially if we have some kind of a speaker, it's different than if it, like management Q&A, it annoys me when people come and go. I can deal with it, but if we have an invited speaker that's being invited to Woodland Pond, it's just not good etiquette to have people coming and going.
Do you think it would help if whoever was in charge of that function had a usher? I don't know who you're having putting signs up or anything, but you think that might help? That the people running the meeting could control who comes in afterwards, whether it's acceptable or not?
So I think that won't make it any less distracting. I think you'll still have then have 2 people trying to get somebody to a seat. The other issue is, and particularly we see this in this room and in the PAC, is there is a lot of ambient noise that comes from the hallway. And if you're sitting in the back, you're hearing a lot of noise coming from that hallway and it's very distracting. I think it's just appropriate that this is how it be done. You know, it's something that I don't think is like a showstopper, but it's just, I think it's just typical etiquette.
That's on that topic. Any questions for Michelle from the table? On there? Okay. That's the one, please. And then we get to the audience.
I've already met one resident who complained about it. They may have misinterpreted it to every single meeting. But one of my problems is if people from the health center want to come and need help getting here, are they gonna be not allowed in also?
Well, we would just make sure they're here on time. The issue is getting here before the event starts. So it has nothing to do with who the person is or where they're coming from. It's just a standard expectation that if you're coming to an event that you be here on time.
Also, the person said there are a lot of meetings here. And to run from one meeting to the other, especially if you have mobility problems, you can't get there on time.
That's definitely something that's come up, and Jason is talking with his staff and with Gretchen about how to alleviate that problem. Because we do hear that from residents, and I do see that a lot of the times that people are coming, they're coming from another meeting. That's on us to do a better job scheduling, so we leave a little bit of a buffer in between. Right now, we tend to start things right on the hour. We could give a buffer of a window to allow for that, so we're looking at that kind of thing. I'm 100% on board with that, I understand that.
One possibility would be to close the doors on the dot and start the meeting, and then perhaps at 10 past, have a brief pause and let in the latecomers, have the latecomers wait outside and then let them in, as I say, maybe about 10 past.
I think that's definitely something to think about, that's a good idea. The other thing is, that Jason and I have talked about is, reserving seats in the back for the people that come, because that would be much less disruptive. Oftentimes, the seats that are available are right in the front or they're in the middle of a row, and it's just chaotic. So if we can just keep some available, and this wouldn't be for everything, it would just be for the bigger ones that we expect are gonna be full. And I think the residents would just need to understand, it's not gonna be a hard and fast thing, but on the bigger ones that Jason uses his judgment and says, this one, you know, I mean, this one's one that we're gonna expect a lot of people, it's an invited speaker, I mean, we'll come up with some kind of a program, but all of these are very reasonable questions.
I like these suggestions that people have made and the points that were brought out, but I think this is a little bit draconian, strong for a first step. I think maybe some sort of public information program first, telling people, we have this problem, could you please work a little bit at being there at the beginning of an event, or could you plan not to come if you don't think you can be there at the beginning? But it shouldn't apply to everybody until we've tried to get the public to work around it.
Okay, so if we were to do that, what do you suggest? How do we evaluate that? How long do we give? How do we evaluate it? Because a lot of times, as you know, it's very hard for residents to hear information and retain it. It's a major communication problem. So what is your suggestion on that?
One way of driving it home would be to have, as was suggested, an usher who lets people in late, but tries to help them and suggests that they come on time, that this is our policy.
Okay, so I'll bring this back to Jason and we'll think about it a little bit more. The other thing that we are planning on doing, Lindsay doesn't know this yet, but I'm gonna have her order stanchions or some kind of an indicator for every meeting that's going on in every room, so that when residents walk by, they know what's going on in that room at that time, and it'll be Jason's staff that will switch those signs out before the next thing starts, because one of the things we see all the time is people stand here and look in the meeting and see who's in there, what is this about? Or they'll stick their head in and say, what is this about? So we think, like, just from a communication perspective, and this is common, you see it at conferences, hotels, et cetera, just it says right, or colleges, you know, whatever class it is. And eventually, I think with the renovation, we have the opportunity to do electronic signs. So you can just do it from the computer, but for now, we can just either do framed signs or stanchions. And that should cut down on some of the confusion, I think, too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Moving on, the subject of resident participation or resident council participation. Yeah, I'm trying to get my microphone. The subject of resident participation or resident council participation in the risk assessment that you talked about. I know you brought it up at the finance review committee the other day, and you know they're working on it. I've been talking to you yesterday. I sense that I jumped the gun a little bit quick last month. That you get the managers reviewing that a little bit closer and refining their outcome, their expectations.
Right, so I don't think we've discussed this in any kind of a significant forum, but it certainly has come up at the finance review committee, because the finance review committee is interested in these kinds of things. In December of this year, I notified my team and the board that we were gonna be doing a formalized succession planning process for every executive team member and their direct reports. And it's a 6-month process where there's steps for each month, steps in January, February, and so on. And each department head is going to work with me to come up with a very clear succession plan for their position. And the reason that this is the right time to do that is because we're starting to see retirements and we're starting to see people planning for retirement. And for certain positions we have here, there is not an heir apparent within Woodland Pond, and in other positions, it's a licensed position. We may not, for Philip, for example, he's a licensed nursing home administrator, he's the only one. And to achieve your licensure, it's a 3-year process. So if we have candidates internally, we don't want to wait the 3 years, we want to get the ball rolling. Christie's position, very, very specialized, you know, and she does not have an heir apparent. So it's important that we do this. That's step one. The other thing that we're undertaking as part of the same timeframe is an enterprise-wide risk evaluation. So we are continually evaluating risks, and we have an extensive emergency preparedness policy and procedure for every anticipated type of emergency. And this is something we've cultivated for many years. We also have a formalized business continuity and disaster recovery plan, which primarily focuses on IT elements, but also on downtime procedures when IT goes down. So payroll, medication administration, yada, yada. We are at a point now that we want to make an integrated, what's called an integrated strategic plan. So our initial strategic plan was based on where we thought we needed to go from 2018 to 2023-24. Now we want to incorporate a full risk evaluation. So what we did was to start this process. In January, we went off site, our entire team, with Chris Druin, who's our board chair, facilitating a retreat, and another board member, Kristen Johnson. They volunteered their time to do this, and it was just all of the department heads in the room. We took those big giant pieces of paper, and one by one, every single department, we just listed every single risk that we think could ever happen for that department. And the result of that was a list that, number one, lists out anything that anybody says here keeps them up at night from the exec team, and then any risk that was identified as a potential risk for any department, okay? So we shared the report with the finance review committee, so that they know where we are. And then Dave and some others reacted to it in that, oh my God, we have all these things going on. These are all the risks that are happening. And that's the opposite of what the case is. It's actually anticipating any risk that could potentially happen ever. So before we publish anything, the next step in the process has to happen, which is every single risk that's identified is being categorized into, is this currently a problem? What's the likelihood of it happening? What are the potential risks to Woodland Pond, financial, operational, reputational, et cetera. And then, for the ones that are high or medium, to make sure that we have an existing mitigating factor in place or what would be the mitigating factor. So it's a multi-month process, but the outcomes and the deliverables on both of those is that the board will receive at their annual June meeting the full succession planning plan and the fully evaluated enterprise-wide risk evaluation.
There's no need for resident council input at this point.
Not at this point. I think it's important that before we publish any draft of it, to your point and others that kind of said, oh my God, this list is so long, it was intended to be long. And some of the stuff on there is ridiculous, because we literally were just putting any potential risk that could go out there. And, so for example, a couple of things we talked about yesterday, we have an employee coming to work impaired. Okay, so that went up as a risk. We don't currently have that happening, thank God, but it certainly could happen. And we currently have policies of what to do if we have a concern that someone's impaired. But the fact that it shows up on the list means we want to make sure we have a response ready and in the can, not necessarily that it is something that's currently happening. So I don't want to really do much until we've got them categorized and so forth.
Let's move on to communication. Oh, sorry.
In that risk plan, is there any discussion of what to do with the pet residents here? I know Pet Ponders is working on gathering information from other CCRCs and first responders here. It's apparently a slow process, but is that going to be considered in your risk policy?
To be honest with you, Evelyn, it was 8 pages single spaced of items. I don't remember everything that's on there, but I'll write it down. And certainly if anyone has anything that they want to make sure we're thinking of or is on the list, anybody can ever email us and I'll add that down and make sure that something like that is on there. Tons of emergency plans and stuff are on there, but specific to pets, I don't remember. And I think we talked about exactly what you're doing because I don't have any great answer. I don't know that any CCRCs are dealing with this or any kind of other residential, because it would apply to really any residential, multi-family or residence housing. I don't really know what the answer is. So I'll be curious to see what you come up with, but certainly making a placeholder for it on the list is easy peasy.
Communications. We talked about how the council had done a survey. Thank you, Lindsay, for helping compile it. We put together some comments and a presentation for our community. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but when I brought this up to you yesterday, say, oh, you'll want to know that we can help you sort out these 50 ways to leave your lover or whatever Tom called them. 26 ways to communicate. So, Yakov, this one's for you. This one's for you. Listen.
This one's for you, Yakov. We completely agree. Communication, I think, is by far our biggest challenge at Woodland Pond. To the point that it's pervasive with everything that we do. I specifically talk about this at New Employee Orientation, about the importance of good communication and the communication fundamentals that we expect, because everything succeeds or fails on communication. One of the challenges that we have with the resident communication is we know that residents receive information and communicate in a variety of different ways. What we also know is that we have not been helping ourselves in one of the critical aspects, and that's electronic communication. And this is what we talked about. So Yakov, where you come into play on this, I don't know if you remember, but you and Cam, we're going to be doing a project for us to try to consolidate the various types of electronic communication that we were using. So the portal, Connected Living, BraveNet, email, yada, yada. And then Cameron left and it didn't really move forward in any kind of a significant way. Since that time, I delegated that project to Jason and Terrell. And they have been speaking with vendors that can help us consolidate all of our electronic communication into one platform. And the aspects that they're looking at is some sort of a messaging system like the forums, some kind of an email kind of subscription, all of the components of connected living, schedule, and we wanted to have a desktop application and a handheld application. We're looking at components that have emergency response or emergency messaging. And they have actually found one. They've been working on this for 5 or 6 months, but they have one now that they're ready to have me start to look at and consider that they feel is gonna check off all the boxes. So again, I would welcome, if there are any specific components that any resident or resident council member feels we should be looking at in such a tool, please just send me an email or Jason or Terrell. We want to be as responsive as we can to whatever the residents are looking for, but ultimately what we want to do is eliminate the multiple different sources of things, so everyone just has one go-to. The program that we're looking at is called In Focus. And again, we're looking to make sure that it can coordinate with visual touch and the reservation system and just have everything in one place.
That sounds exactly like some of the feedback you got. Is just so many ways to go and confusing, overlapping.
Yeah, I think the challenge will continue to be, and this is where I certainly welcome, and we haven't solved it in almost 16 years, is the analog communication. So for the people that aren't, tech involved, is what is the right way, what's the right balance of analog communication? How do we get things out there? Because we communicate things till we're blue in the face. We're gonna talk about the invited speaker series. We talked about that till we were blue in the face and there's still confusion about it. So even when we talk about things till we're blue in the face, it's still not getting through. So you guys have a problem to solve. How do we do that?
So, are there less?
It's a good start.
Yeah.
Are there less? Are you finding there's less people relying on analog and more on digital now, or is it kind of always going to be a certain 20% or 25%?
So currently, so it's interesting. We have, I would say right now, 5 residents in independent living that just have dug their feet in every way from Saturday to getting an email address. We've offered to help, these are people that are otherwise very active, people that you see all the time, people that are not cognitively impaired. They're just I don't want to touch email. I think that is changing as time goes on. It used to be the case that many of our residents didn't have an email address. If you look at the phone list now, though, basically almost everyone except for maybe that 5 have an email address attached.
12. I counted them yesterday. It's 12, not 5.
But that includes health center.
No, I'm not including the health center. There are 12 people in independent living who do not use email. On the phone
On the
list,
phone
it
list.
says do not use email.
Okay, so that number may have grown, which surprises me, so I'll look at that because the number we use anecdotally is 5, we know who they are and we do communicate with those people differently. So I'll have Lindsay look at the list, just to see who the 12 are, Wayne, because that surprises me a little bit. But anyway, so I think as time goes on, it's reasonable to expect as generations are more connected and have been since childhood, it's just gonna be more and more people that are electronically connected, but we currently have an analog problem as well as a digital problem, so we just have to continue to work through it.
Mr. Pittman would like to speak.
This is a surprise.
I know. Thanks, I think this is good news. There's 2 questions. One of them, what do you want me to contribute to that? That's a separate one. But the other one is even analog communications. If you have a good system that it's integrated, all it takes is to print a notice and put it on somebody's mail, or to send them a voice message if they use the phone, but they don't even read. Okay, so I think I would say that this is the minimum of the problems. I think part of the bigger problem is that there is so many platforms and so many systems, and nobody usually goes and searches each one of them. So one of the main things that when we spoke with Cameron was that it should be more or less essentially a push system. So it sends the information to you, you are able to delete it, you don't need to collect it, and you just it doesn't matter to me, just get rid of it. But otherwise, And I'm on the computer hours a day. And I know that I don't have enough time to check each one of them, even once a week sometimes. So I think, and the other question is, I don't know what you want me to help with. I mean, I will be happy to.
Right, so we talked about how will this roll out? And right now, as I said, I've delegated this to Terrell and Jason for obvious reasons. Terrell on the tech side and Jason certainly on the resident interface side. They have again narrowed this down to this one system. They're ready for me to start looking at it, look at they do like a digital presentation and so forth. Once I feel comfortable with it, then there will be resident involvement. Certainly the residents council, the resident tech committee was the other committee that I think you brought that up yesterday. So Dave had suggested maybe the resident tech assistants, and then also the residents council would be the right groups to look at it. Because we have this great group of volunteers, you're part of it, I think Ronnie Sue is part of it, and a bunch of other people. You'll be the ones that get the questions, right? So once we roll any kind of a system out, you're gonna wanna be proficient in how to answer your neighbors' questions. So I think it would naturally go to the residents council and to that tech group to start. And then we would go from there based on any feedback that you have. But again, similar to everything I've said already tonight, if anybody has any specific functionalities, Jakob, I wrote down the push notifications is crucial. If you have any other aspects or components that you want to see in a system like that, please let us know, and we'll go through that.
Thank you. Any other questions on that topic? Thank you. Okay. So as I said, when you entered the room, there was, I didn't count them, but I'm going to say probably close to 10 people speaking on the topic of the invited speaker series. The theme is that fellow residents are being forced to do something that wasn't done before, and it's onerous, and nobody spoke in favor of it. Okay.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. Nobody likes to do anything more. So none of this surprises me.
And they'd also appreciate some chance to interact with your comments on this.
Okay, so just to get everybody level set on where we are with this and history on this. Prior to, I would say mid-year last year, we had no controls over who was coming in the building for an invited speaker. And that was identified by us as being a significant risk. So what do we do when we have a risk? We have to address it. So we say, okay, what are our risks related to speakers? The risks are legal risks, risks related to our tax exempt status, and reputational risks. Okay, so how do we address that? I proposed that a resident inviter speaker committee handle this oversight and coordination. That was vetoed or knocked down by the residents council. When that happened, we reverted to the process that we had put into place when this initially came up, which is that all we need is approval from Bridget that this speaker is not violating any of those three things. I am open to every type of suggestion of how we get Bridget that information. What we have in hand right now is an extraordinarily simple form that requires like 5 pieces of information, which everybody that's coordinating a speaker already knows. You know the name of the speaker, you know why they're being invited, you know what they're talking about. All we have asked is that that gets put on a piece of paper and it goes to Bridget to sign off and say, cool, we're good on this. That's where we're at. There is absolutely, and never has been, regardless of what anyone in this room or any other resident thinks, any kind of an attempt to restrict anything from what I have just said, except for 501c3 risks, legal risks, and to some extent reputational risks. And all of those things are completely delineated in our corporate compliance plan. And that is why this sits with Bridget. She's our corporate compliance officer. So I absolutely want to get into dialogue on this, but I think before we do, there has to be an acknowledgement that no one has ever suggested that we don't bring speakers in, that the residents don't control the speakers that are brought in, But it is completely irresponsible of us to have speakers at Woodland Pond, and I completely take responsibility for not having realized this years and years ago. We cannot have people in the building speaking on something that we don't know who they are and why they're here, period. It's irresponsible. So this is simply a cataloging and a very quick step running through corporate compliance, and to my knowledge, since we re-effectuated this, Bridget has declined no one. No one has been refused. The other thing that I think is demonstrative, Yakov and I had a nice exchange. Yakov sent me a suggestion last night, which I'm all for, basically somewhere putting a disclaimer that says anyone that does come and speak is not speaking on behalf of Woodland Pond. I'm totally open to that. I think it's a great idea. We gotta figure out where it goes. Does it go on the website? Does it go somewhere? But what I felt was important to say is that for those that feel that Woodland Pond is some kind of an intent to restrict, you would see us at every single meeting. You would see us at committees, you would see us at interest groups, and we would be monitoring things. And that's not happening, and it never has. No one has suggested we change how much we're attending. Currently, leadership only attends roughly 10% of resident public meetings, period. And those are only for the committees where there's a management liaison. You don't generally see, except for Gretchen, obviously, but you don't see Bridget there from a corporate compliance perspective. You don't see me sitting in, you don't see Jason or Tom or anybody sitting in to monitor what's being discussed. And if we truly had a concern or trying to restrict anything, that would be the opposite. We'd be sitting right there like the police, which we do not want to do. So I want to make it clear that all we are trying to do is make sure we know who is coming to speak, who they're being invited by, that Bridget does not think it violates anything in our corporate compliance plan, which incorporates the 501c3, the legal and reputational stuff, and then we carry on. And that's all we're asking to do. That's all we're suggesting needs to happen. I equate it to, think about this. So I listen to NPR. NPR oftentimes, WAMC, they oftentimes have speakers coming in to talk on this topic or that topic or whatever. They will always say at the beginning, here's why this person is here, right? So this way Woodland Pond will know, okay, so I want to go talk about, let's say, being a travel sport parent, okay? I am an expert on that. Not because I went to college for it, but I've lived that for the last 10 years. Literally 12 months out of the year, I am a travel sport parent, okay? So I'm an expert. So what would I say I am on here though? I might say I'm a content expert. Okay, great. So I'm gonna circle content expert, and then I'm gonna say, here's why I'm a content expert, because this has been my lived experience for the last 10 years, 12 months out of the year. Bridget's gonna say, okay, that makes sense. I'm down with that. All right, you can talk about being a travel sport parent. I can tell you every single thing about it. It doesn't mean that I went to college for it, but then this way, what none of you know or don't yet understand, because I haven't talked about it, is there's always things in the background going on at Woodland Pond. You all know that Gretchen is retiring. When that happens, there are going to be seed changes that happen with the activities programming. It's just going to evolve. And one of the things that I have been working with her to try and incorporate, she's just been reticent because she's winding down, she's not wanting to wind up, is that when we announce why someone's talking, when we put something in Woodland Life and talk about why is this person coming, a resident can have enough background to say, this person is a professor in this person is a content expert because she's done it for 10 years, to give you more context as to why this person is the right person to be talking about the topic. It's simply a categorizing, that's all. We have no intention of refusing anyone. I am very confident that residents are only going to bring forth people that you think will protect our 501c3 status and our legal issues. I do not have any question about that, but at the same time, it is irresponsible for us not to know who's being invited to come and speak here in public. It's just irresponsible, and it opens us up to risk.
There was also the part of that has read the requirement that residents themselves be a resident speaker to do the same form as an outside speaker, and that was a topic of several of the speakers this morning.
Okay, so I would like to explore that because from our perspective, you may all know what you all bring to the table, but I don't necessarily know, and Bridget certainly doesn't know. So there is no way for us to exclude, in my opinion, no reason or right for us to exclude a resident. We still need to know, is this person a professional, are they a content expert, et cetera? And I'll give you an example. So Dr. Estwick, who many of you know, Dr. Estwick had come to see me last summer and he wanted to do a presentation on fall prevention. Okay, Dr. Estwick is still a licensed physiatrist in New York State. He said to me, Michelle, I want to do a presentation on fall prevention. And I said no. Because Woodland Pond has a department of licensed professionals that are responsible for educating our residents on fall prevention. And he did not want to coordinate with them. He made it very clear. He didn't want to coordinate with them. He didn't want to make sure that and this is no secret. I mean, he will talk to you about this if you ask. He felt like he needed to do it on his own. It didn't need to be coordinated. And my concern, of course, was we've got at any given time, 30 residents doing PT and OT, and they're hearing from our licensed staff, our staff, here's what we are recommending you do. So to have a resident come up, even if qualified, in a topic that might not be coordinated appropriately, it's a problem. So Dr. Estwick didn't like that, obviously. He and I had excellent relationships. We were able to talk through it, and that's the way it should be working. We're never all going to agree on things. There's a way to have an appropriate dialogue, and we've had it. He said, let me have an opportunity to tell you what I want to talk about. Please let me write this up for you. I'll write up a syllabus, because the preliminary conversation was fall prevention. Once he wrote up the syllabus, which he offered to do, I did not ask him to do it. It was, 2 paragraphs or whatever. It determined that, and for those of you that went to the presentation, which eventually was approved, he was almost entirely focused on mechanics, your gait, how your foot strikes the floor, that kind of thing, which our staff touches on a little bit in PTOT, but he wanted to go into a deep dive on it. And of course he's credentialed to do that, and it wasn't going to conflict with anything. He was going to take a specific aspect of it. He was very focused on it, and with additional information, it completely made sense. And then, so it's important for us to have the context, is my feeling. But why don't we discuss however you want to do this?
First, anybody at the table? Jakob, did you take the microphone? Oh, sorry.
The process you just described in connection with Randy speaking makes it clear just how time consuming and complicated it might be for any given resident out of the 200 plus of us here that might have to go through in order to get something approved for them to give a presentation. I cannot foresee or imagine any of us wanting to get into that deep of a discussion about something we're going to talk about, whether it be astronomy or wood ducks or whatever it might be.
And I completely agree with that, which is why we, as I said, he offered the syllabus. I did not ask for it. When we talked about this initially with the Invited Speaker Series committee, you all remember we wanted a syllabus, we wanted a full bio, we wanted potentially other empirical evidence on this, and this residence council made it clear that's way too much work. Okay, and so we backed off on that entirely. So all we are literally asking for is the person's name, the topic they're going to speak on, what qualifies them to do it. Please elaborate on the qualifications, who invited the speaker, and which committee or interest group has purview over this topic. We don't ask for the syllabus. We don't ask for the details. This is as simple as it gets. I mean, we can simplify it more, but I mean, this form takes maybe 5 minutes to fill out. So if we have 20 speakers a month, which is more than what we have, it's 20 minutes times 20 people times, give it maybe 10 minutes to fill out the form. So I don't think it's onerous. It accomplishes what we need, which is to say, okay, this is why this person's being brought in. This is how they're qualified. So we can say we know everyone that's coming in and how they've come to be, and then we move on. So I listened to what the Residence Council said and removed the requirements for the syllabus and the description and yada yada. It's not even on the form, other than just the title of the topic.
Audience?
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for explaining everything. I don't want to talk for other people here, but I think that probably most of us would not have a problem with that form for an invited speaker. And actually, I did fill out the form for Simon Gilhooly, who came, and I agree with you, it's a very simple form and it was approved and no big deal. But I think what several of us are concerned about is the request that went out for residents to fill it out. Now, there are residents who give a formal presentation. I know, Mel, I always pick on you, but I know you've talked about astronomy or other physics and things like that. But so many things go on in groups that people talk for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I know at Shalom Space, which I don't go to that often, but I spoke for 10 minutes. I know that people speak for 10 minutes at current events, land conservation. There are other groups where people just speak for 10 minutes. It seems, how can I say this, Michelle? It seems a little insulting that we are accomplished people, that we can't talk for 10 minutes to our peers without having to fill out a form. It seems a little overkill.
So I'm glad you brought that up. This is a conversation that I had with Joe yesterday to make a distinction. We are not asking for this for any of the committees that just have discussions. You've never seen me at a current events group. I don't go to it. We don't ask for it for current events. This is strictly only when we are being informed that there is a speaker. So we don't know if that person's speaking for an hour or 10 minutes. This is the first I'm hearing that that's the case. So if there is a request for us to consider some sort of a variation on a process, because it's something like what you're describing, I'm totally open to it. But what we know now is this group is having this speaker, and that's what Gretchen is told, and that's all we know. So we are not trying to be heavy-handed. We don't come to the literature and loss group. We don't come to memoir writing and all these other places where discussions are going on. And in particular, I would expect that at current events in particular, there's probably some dissension. There's probably some things being said in there that if I went in, I'd probably get nervous, but that's why I don't go.
I think you're wrong.
That's why you don't.
I think
That's why I
you're
don't
wrong.
go.
There isn't dissension and people behave very cordially to each other.
I'm not saying that they don't behave cordially.
No, but I think you'd be surprised.
Yeah, what I'm saying is I think that in any of these, I probably would, I'm very conservative when it comes to anything that happens at Woodland Pond, admittedly. But this is why I don't intentionally go to these things, because I don't want to appear heavy-handed, and this is why my staff doesn't go. We only go to the meetings where we have a liaison to a committee. So again, I hear what you're saying. We have intentionally excluded anyone except someone that's putting out that this person is coming to present on this topic. If, and I shouldn't even say that, because there are people that present here that are excluded from this. For example, we don't require Peter Brown to do a form for his travelogue because he's not speaking on anything. He's just basically presenting his travelogue, okay? That's different. That's not a speaker. Same thing for ArtScope. We don't require ArtScope or performers. To me, that's all art, theater. Those are all excluded. We currently are not including any of that. It's just the invited speakers. So perhaps that needs a different definition. Maybe it's a matter of definition, but residents are not going to be excluded from it because you know each other's background to some extent, but there's always new residents. Bridget has absolutely no idea what qualifies you to come speak on anything. And no one is going to look at us and say, well, just because that person's a resident here means that they should just be able to get up freely and have a discussion about something. It wouldn't be acceptable anywhere else. It shouldn't be acceptable here, in my opinion. We should know what qualifies you to have that discussion, even if it's self-qualification. Then we just say, this person is interested in this topic, and that's one of the choices, an enthusiast. You know, all we're doing is categorizing it. just so we know this person's an enthusiast or this person did that. And then we put the disclaimer out there that this person's an enthusiast, they're not an expert on this, to your point about how none of this reflects Woodland Pond's position necessarily.
Alon Schwartz. Two things. One, it seems to me that when a committee or an interest group invites someone to speak, they will only do that if they know that that speaker has something they want to hear and is qualified to give that. Therefore, I don't see any reason to have anyone need to fill out any form to demonstrate their qualifications or the relevance of their topic. They've already been vetted by the people who are inviting them. We don't invite somebody who just arrived to start speaking. We only invite people whose expertise we are aware of if we are in a committee. The second thing is quite different. You said there are 3 criteria that you used, and the one that's totally undefined is reputational. Could you tell us what you mean by reputational?
No, because it's amorphous. And that's where I think this room will lose their minds. Because you want some kind of a definition, you want some kind of a, black and white answer, and there's no black and white answer. This is why it has to sit with somebody on my staff that can vet it against our corporate compliance plan. So.
What does the corporate compliance plan say?
Let's show.
The corporate compliance plan is available to anybody that wants to read it. It's done by legal counsel. It talks all about harassment, discrimination, all those kinds of things. There's a structure in New York State that requires a corporate compliance plan that has 8 components. Ours has it. We'll share it with anybody that wants to see it. That's not the point. The point is that reputational risk can somewhat be in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly. And that's where censorship can come in.
Right, but
That's
again,
the concern.
and I don't know why. This is where I'm very frustrated, as you can see. We have no record of censoring anything here. There's been one speaker in 15 years that I denied because she was staunchly political and couldn't get out of her own way. We don't put ourselves into the situations. We don't do anything about what everyone is kind of making a mountain out of a molehill on here. If we were concerned, we'd be sitting in those meetings and censoring them. We're not doing that. All we're asking is to categorize the speaker. That's all we're asking.
Yeah, I think that you would do well just to drop the reputational. You haven't used it.
I have used it many times. I've said it throughout this entire discussion.
No, I mean, you haven't used it to eliminate anyone. You just told us.
So not to eliminate anyone, but I also mentioned exactly a prime example of where this came up. It just happened to be timely at that time, but this is a typical thing that you might see. So New Paltz has a community moderated Facebook page. Right around the time that this was percolating with the Residents Council about the invited speaker series, literally that week, there was a whole thread on the moderated page about how Woodland Pond is harboring Zionists. Okay, and it went into a multiple lengthy thing. To me, that's a problem. Our name shouldn't be attached to anything negative out in the public, period. Okay.
I'm not sure that's negative, but okay.
Well, but
Well said.
Here we go again. I would be opposed to that because the same way, I mean, somebody else can say it's Woodland Pond is a focus of left radicals, okay? And I don't think that we should have procedures to prevent that because you cannot prevent what goes on the media. People say all kinds of things.
and I
Okay.
agree with that, Jakob.
So-
I didn't then come back and say we're not having any discussions about
No,
Israel or
but then-
Palestine. We restricted nothing after that. I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah, but I mean, that additional example is, we had discussions here and a lot of discussions, whether people consider them or don't consider them, I can guarantee you they are political, okay? Just talking about electric vehicles it's a political issue.
No one is saying you
No,
can't
no,
have political
what I'm
discussion.
saying is that the problem is that when you have there that, I mean, somebody in management, and probably you're referring to Bridget, she will have to make the call, what's reputation?
No, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. Can I please just stop you there? Because you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I need everyone to hear me. Please listen to what I'm saying.
Okay.
She's checking it against the corporate compliance plan, period. That's it. All I was explaining is that the corporate compliance plan has legal components, things related to our tax exempt status, and things that I would categorize as reputational issues, sexual harassment, any kind of harassment, any kind of discrimination. Those things are problematic. And that's related to reputation. It's not related to our tax exempt status, and it's not related to something legal. So maybe instead of reputational, it's ethical. But all she's doing is vetting it against the existing corporate compliance plan, period. She's not twisting it in any way.
Okay, I have two issues. One is that if that, as you say, I'm sure that's true, this reputational category is amorphous. Bridget is making some kind of judgment on her own about what is acceptable or unacceptable.
No,
Right.
she's just adjudicating it against this policy, period,
But
in a way that's black and white. I'm attaching the word reputational risk. That's not in the handbook. That's not in the compliance
Okay, so
policy.
we need to look at the handbook. The other thing I wanted to say though is I really think we have to look at the distinction between outside speakers and resident speakers. And I think it's pretty insulting to think that someone who lives here would want to do something that would hurt Woodland Pond's reputation.
And I want to address that because as much as many of you and many of our residents in the past have had great judgment, are right on point, we absolutely have people here that should never be allowed to stand up and speak without somebody putting an asterisk on it and saying, you know, and that's because they're loose cannons. I mean,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
that's-
we have never refused anyone though. So I guess not a resident speaker, Taylor. Never have we ever questioned it. We don't sit in on the
But that
meetings.
still is assuming that, I mean, I take it personally that someone has to vet what I say as a speaker. When I live here and we assume that everyone here has a right to their opinion. And that the rest of us can choose to go to a speech because we want to hear that opinion, whether somebody else thinks it's cockamamie or not.
So that's
Right?
my exact point. You're making my exact point.
Okay, good. What is it?
No, but I don't think we're gonna agree. You're saying that we should be able to come and hear someone's opinion. So all we're asking is, tell us, is this an opinion? Or is this person a subject matter expert? This is getting twisted in a way that it shouldn't be. All we are asking is for you to tell us, who is the person? What is the title of their topic? We dropped the syllabus, we dropped the explanation. Why are they here? And
See, I object to asking any questions of residents here, so we do disagree.
okay, so we should probably explore that more. And help me to understand, get comfortable with why a resident, this is where I think the sticking point is. And I'm not there yet. So I think to the extent that some of you wanna get together and explain to me, other than the being offended part, because any speaker would be offended, and they are offended when we ask them these questions. You know, I don't think that's unique to Woodland Pond residents. I don't see any of these questions as being offensive. I don't know which of these is objectionable.
The fact that you don't trust the resident, that management doesn't trust the residents.
I think I can
Judges
explain.
From each other.
I think I can explain why, because the trouble with this form is that it implies that there are two possible outcomes of it. One outcome is that it's filled out and everything is fine. The other outcome is that it's filled out and it is not fine, meaning that whoever is filling it out would not be allowed to talk about whatever is on the form. the two outcomes are implied by the existence of the form. You know, we don't have a discussion about whether the sun is going to rise in the east every morning because there's only one outcome. Here there are two, and the implication that a resident has to justify themselves to say whatever they want to their peers is really quite insulting. And I'd like to catastrophize a little bit. Let's say that somebody does stand up at Shalom Space or wherever and say something and they're ignorant. They don't know what they're talking about, or they say something that other people disagree with, or some other objectionable thing. What is the harm? There is no harm. So this form is really a big problem.
So I completely agree with you. We're not attending meetings or censoring content.
So then
All
why ask
we are, because we need, Joe, we need to know who's here in this building as an invited speaker.
No, talking about residents.
It's in Woodland Life every month. You wanna know who's speaking? You know.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be a surprise to management though.
It's not a surprise. You know.
Gretchen is not part of somebody to adjudicate the corporate compliance plan. And I think that it's also important for everyone to understand that this is not just coming from me or from the executive team. This has been fully vetted with the board and they have no objection to this. Because they understand what we're trying to do here. And that's fine.
Objection. You're hearing the objection.
Joe, this is brand new to me, that the residents want to be excluded
Jacqueline,
from
could you
this.
give her the microphone back?
So what I'm hearing is residents want residents to be excluded from the form.
Yes.
Not that you object to the
Yes.
form.
Right.
So bring that argument and explain to me why, justify it. No, I mean, like, in a way that I can bring it back to my team, because I'm not hearing anything other than it's offensive.
It's our community. We
One-
want to be able to speak freely where we live to our neighbors. That's all.
Do I have the floor or not?
Sorry.
You have the mic.
What, well, but didn't seem to. I have heard discussions from people who would like to invite people on various subjects, people who are expert in the field, who have the credentials that you've discussed. But they don't want to do it because they're afraid the person might be turned down. And then they would have the embarrassment of having to go to that person and say, yes, Professor, I understand you've written 12 books and edited all this, but I have to withdraw my invitation. This is a concern that has prevented people from being invited. I'm just informing you. I happen to be a professor who's taught at the graduate level in economics, political science, sociology, have written and edited a dozen books and 100 articles. But I have not volunteered to give talks because it is my sense, and here is where what you've said is important, that you are a much more conservative person than I am, and that while I am unbiased in the work I do, I'm not neutral. I have views, and I would express those views. But this has kept me from offering to give talks, although at the request of the Earth Day Committee, I did last year, but I decided not to do one this year because the politics has changed with the election, and a number of things that would have helped the environment have been canceled or reversed. And if I were to talk about this, it would obviously be political. And I was afraid I don't want to create dissension at Woodland Pond, and I'm intimidated from doing it. So I think if you would take that on board, this might be a factor. The other thing is, I was very glad that you clarified at Sholem Space, which used it, or other people use an example, that people introduce something for 10 minutes and then there's a discussion. That happens at other groups as well. And if it is now clear, I think you've maybe calmed some people down, that they don't have to fill out these forms. It's only for someone giving a talk. But even there, the point I raised about people not wanting to invite people and my hesitancy to speak, I think are disturbing, and you might maybe respond. Thanks.
I am very concerned about that. Because again, and I used this phrase when I was communicating with Yakov this morning, actions speak louder than words. Nothing in any of the actions that we have taken in terms of meetings have ever suggested that we're trying to censor anything. We don't come to meetings, we don't sit in on them, so even if we were concerned, we're not sitting in. And it's very concerning to me that anyone would not bring someone forth for a speaker because they don't want to fill out the form. What I think might make all of this easier on everybody that's signing and having problems with this is to take out the qualifications part. So literally just, here's the topic, here's why they're coming, and be done with it. Joe, we need to know who's coming here as a speaker, period. No, before it gets into the calendar. That is appropriate and responsible. That's appropriate and responsible. I'm happy to take the qualifications out. I think that should mollify some people. I would like to hear if that is acceptable and how we then make a distinction. I think the other thing that needs to be excluded from this process clearly is what I would consider, Ronnie, what you're describing to me is more of what I would consider to be a facilitator or a conversation starter versus a speaker. I think there can be distinctions made for that. I am open to making this as easy as possible and allowing for things to go as smoothly as possible, but with still having some advanced information of knowing who's trying to come in. So I'd like to find us a way to bridge the gap. And I think we can carve certain things out. We've already carved out basically all the committees, discussions. So maybe there's a category of facilitator. This meeting will be facilitated by so-and-so, and here's the topic. I'm golden with that. That's not somebody standing up there as a speaker. And then combine that with Yakov's recommendation of, things that are said at Woodland Pond are not the position of Woodland Pond. I think that also is careful. So I'm open to all of this. I want to make this as open and welcoming as possible. I welcome, yes, I'm conservative, but that doesn't matter. I appreciate opposing viewpoints, very much so. Any way that we can foster that, and I have no expectation that it's going to be hostile or inappropriate between the residents. And I'm saying that on the record, I've never had a concern about that. If I did, I would have Jason there, I'd be there, Tom would be there, security would be there. We're not doing that. And again, I'm just asking you to think about actions speaking louder than words. I think words have gotten very twisted, but our actions, by not being at these things, by not sitting in on them, by not reviewing, should be speaking louder than any words that have been said. So I want to open up the pathways in every way that we can, with just having some ability for us to know if it's a speaker on a topic, not a facilitator, not just an open conversation, that we're aware of it and have some level of advanced knowledge. So please bring me your suggestions. Hopefully this can be somewhat of more of a happy medium, more palatable. We're not trying to make it onerous. I'm open to whatever would be, but I don't think that I'll still need some convincing on if the resident is an invited speaker, not a facilitator, whatever, just having some ability for us to say it's got to comply with. Any speaker, I think, should have to comply with the corporate compliance plan. But a speaker is different than a facilitator, in my mind.
Okay, since I have the microphone, I'm gonna open up a can of worms, which will clarify for us somewhat what your actual thinking is. You said you never refused to anybody except one episode, and she was staunchly political. And if you could tell us what you mean by staunchly political, that might help clarify our notion of whether or not this was somebody we should have had the right to hear.
Okay, so this was brought to Sarah initially. I don't remember how it eventually came to my desk because Sarah was very concerned didn't have knowledge about the topic, whatever. So this was her name is Christine Micchio. She's a professor apparently of law and constitutional law. She wanted to come speak about the 14th Amendment. I wanted to understand more about that because as soon as she said that, she was insistent on coming before the election. We tried to push it back to December, but then she insisted on coming before the election, and that absolutely raised red flags with me. Because her topic, combined with the fact that she was insisting on coming before the election, made me nervous. So I scheduled a meeting with her. I gave her unlimited amount of my time. We spoke for 50 minutes and I took extensive notes. She could not get out of her own way in making it very clear that she was planning to come here and push that the only way to protect this is to vote for Biden. She said it multiple times. And I called her out on it. And I said, I think that the topic that you're talking about, the 14th Amendment, is extremely confusing to people, and I think people would like to learn about it. Because we're hearing about this as being a big issue at the election, but the more I talked, the more she said, the only one that's gonna protect it is if we keep Biden in office. And the fact that, combined with the fact that she insisted on having the meeting before the election, to me was too close for comfort.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think this is really okay now. I think this is a question of method. On one hand, you say to us, you're only interested in categorization, and we accept that. On the other hand, the categorization may, as in the case you just cited, raise questions. And then that might have something to do with the 501c3. But latent in there is a decision rule. When is it only categorization? And when does it raise the issue that would be concerning 501c3? And in your method, that's omitted. The question of how do you go from simple categorization to a threat to 501c is left undefined.
You're absolutely right, and I think that we can tighten that up. To me, this is very simple, because I'm familiar with the corporate compliance plan. None of you have probably read it. You don't know that it's black and white. So to me, it's very simple for Bridget to adjudicate anything against this corporate compliance plan. And again, the corporate compliance plan encompasses 501c3, some legal issues and some ethical issues. Discrimination, and again, when I'm saying ethical, I'm not putting a judgment on it, I'm saying this is harassment, discrimination, those things don't fall into some of these other categories, it's not about our tax exempt status. So because I'm familiar with this document, I know it's very easy for her to adjudicate against this. And again, I am 100% willing to remove the categorization part of it because that seems to be a trigger point for the residents. So this way, understanding who's inviting, what's the topic, what's their name. If it's that's enough for Bridget to be able to ask the questions that she needs to of that group. Some of these things, like if somebody's gonna come in and Mel wants to talk about climate change, nobody objected to that, to my knowledge. I don't think that there was even a question raised, and certainly there could be a lot of making it political. But Mel, you didn't get any pushback on that, did you? Okay, so again, I think it's actions speak louder than words, and how do we make this work in a way that makes the process, exactly what you're talking about, clear as to how it will be adjudicated? And I think also publishing the corporate compliance plan so that you can see that it's very black and white and it's not as gray as I didn't do myself any favors of saying reputational risk made it seem. And I can totally understand that that would be a point of concern for all of you.
Is that on the website, Michelle?
No.
I'm gonna just, I was on a corporate compliance committee at a CCRC. Go ahead and read it is all I can say. I couldn't make anything up.
Ours is actually,
and it made no sense.
yeah, ours is actually
Just
pretty
one
clear.
comment. I will take the fact that I have the mic on my hand. Would you consider that if Bridget finds something, that it's not right, that she brings it to the council,
100%.
instead of having a committee that has to reapprove and things.
If the council is willing to do that, 100%. I do not think that anyone should have the unilateral authority to do it. If there's an objection to it,
Yeah, I don't know what he meant. I'm not quite sure what. is being
I think the
said.
well, I think what Yakov is saying is if Bridget rejects something because she feels that it's out of, in objection or in conflict with this.
Yeah.
Then that person has the right, or the inviter has the right to bring it to the council to basically appeal it.
And have Bridget explain.
Yeah, absolutely. I am 100% okay with that. I don't want any of this in the shadows or any secrecy about this, so. Certainly, we will share the corporate compliance plan. We can make an appeal process in here, should it ever happen, but again. I'm asking you to leave this meeting thinking about the fact that actions speak louder than words, and if the things that you're fearful of happening have not happened in 15 or 16 years where we're censoring anyone, there's been one speaker that has not been approved, and I've just explained why. And I think all of you will understand why I was concerned about that. I don't anticipate a lot of refusals, but to Jay's point, explaining how this will be, if she has a concern, it'll be bounced against the corporate compliance plan, and then there's an appeal process to the residents council. I'm totally in favor of that.
We'd like to discuss it.
I'm just saying what I'm in favor of. I don't wanna put anything on their plate.
That's a great idea. I think that's excellent. I need to make one small correction. The reason that you had that discussion with Chris Michelle, was because you had already turned down her talk earlier in the summer, when in fact it was not linked to Biden. And by the time you did speak with her, it was later, and she was all out Biden. And at that time, I told you, I agreed with you. That was absolutely the right thing to do, to turn that down. But earlier, it was not, and that was the basis on which I objected.
So I actually disagree with that, and the reason is because in the correspondence that I got from Sarah earlier in the summer, Chris showed her hand. So I will send that to you and let you know what I saw. I thought maybe you were on it, but that's what prompted the entire thing. So I'll show you where she showed her hand. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Michelle, what you're saying is very reasonable in taking out the qualifications, having Bridget come to the resident council.
No,
My
no,
question.
Let her finish.
If Bridget has a question, she would bring it. That's what I understood. Am I wrong?
No, that nothing's been decided yet, Tamar. I was just asked if I would be in favor of some sort of an appeal process if Bridget declines something. This all has to be discussed. All I'm saying is I'm open to it. I do think that there should be some sort of an appeal process. Whether it's with the residents' council or not, all has to be worked out, but I'm open to it.
My question is this. Since this all came up, we've had a national election and things are different in the country. For example, I know of an analytic institute who had a program scheduled on transgender. They have canceled it because they felt it would be too touchy. Mel with weather. Groups are very concerned about what is politically risky now, and the picture is very much changing about how to look at climate, how to look at automobiles. How do we handle, do you see this becoming an issue for Woodland Pond?
Not at all. Not at all. And I was asked this question multiple times on Monday because, the rhetoric just got so crazy over the weekend. People are worried about all the stuff that's coming out of the Trump administration, the tariffs, the DEI stuff, yada, yada. So I get asked this question a lot. I had the discussion on Monday with several people because on Monday we had what was, by all accounts, one of the more successful events that we've had at Woodland Pond, which was the mixed gen dinner that was brought by the LGBTQIA plus and allies committee, interest group, whatever it is. And my response to anybody that asked me about, did you consider canceling it? Should we be concerned about it? Is I said, bring it on. Let somebody tell us that we need to cancel that. 100%. And I said it in writing and I said it, I went to the meeting. I thought it was fantastic.
You would include DEI or something.
So each of these things is nuanced. And our board had a strategic planning committee meeting yesterday and the board asked the question of what do we need to be concerned about with DEI? And some of these other things, because right now, the administration is threatening to tie some of that to reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid and some other things. On Monday also, we received communication from the CDC that any existing reference to any gender other than male or female in our medical records needs to be removed. So there's always a lot going on, but my intention and what I've said to everyone is until we are forced to stop something, then we're going to continue it. And I don't really care what the political climate is. So if there's something that's working for Woodland Pond and this event on Monday night, I think is a great demonstration of that. Yes, is it unfavorable to some people and Trump and whoever? Absolutely, potentially. Doesn't mean we're gonna stop. Until we're forced to stop, it's not gonna stop as long as it's been working for Woodland Pond.
Yes, but I think one of the problems is we will be forced to stop the day they stop doing Medicare reimbursements. Things like
I
that.
don't think
I'm not asking you for an answer, I'm saying we all live with this.
Yeah, and I think, and I've tried to address this, I think this, we're kind of getting off topic here, but I'm really trying to encourage residents to protect your mental health by not watching the news as much as you are, because things are chaotic right now and nothing is settled. And I think to those that have said, you know, there's unilateral power and, you know, dictator and yada, yada. There's ample situations where the judiciary is stepping in and saying, no, 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 Trump, you can't do that. So I think we need to let this settle down a bit. But as far as Woodland Pond is concerned, until or unless we're forced to stop doing something that has been working for us and that's important to our identity and our mission, we're going to continue it regardless of what the threats are. It's gonna have to be a forced situation and it will not be anything that anybody in this room doesn't know about before it happens.
And the way we dealt with an issue like this at Fox Run, and I don't remember the details, was to come into the corporate compliance and make it not any kind of an issue. We balanced it. We had both sides, and we can do that here. When they shut it down or when they try to shut it down, we have a speaker who addresses the positives and one who addresses the negatives. And then you're not in as far as we understood it, we were not out of compliance.
It really depends on the topic. So our history has always been that if it's political, we have to at least invite somebody from both sides. If they choose not to come, so be it. That's been very clear on the political issues. Where it gets a little bit more gray is anything that would be considered like hate speech, discrimination, harassment, and that's all outlined in here. I wouldn't necessarily want somebody to come in and present both sides of that because I think that some of that could be disgusting and problematic. But certainly on the political side of things. But what I think I'd like to kind of wrap this up a little bit. I'd like to have whoever would like to give me some feedback on this, help me figure out how we can make a definition between a speaker and a facilitator. I think that's important. I will distribute the corporate compliance plan. I'll have Lindsay send it out in constant contact. And then for whomever would like to recommend an appeal process, should we ever find the circumstance where Bridget has adjudicated against this and found that it's not acceptable. I think an appeal process is totally appropriate. So hopefully we can bridge this. I think we can make some progress on this. Certainly I think having an appeal process wherever it lands would be a good thing. So I'm open to further discussion on this.
And I think that discussion doesn't require anybody appearing before the council. I think you can do that offline, so to speak. I think that'd be more productive than to introduce us as, well, y'all can do a better job. So Have you all had a fair chance to let Michelle know what's on your mind? Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
We're not done yet, we're still in session, we have a business meeting to go, so if you're gonna leave, please leave quietly. Thank you, Michelle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please. Quietly, please. Okay. We still got a quorum, right, Tom? Okay, Larry's got a bus to catch, Mel's got something, but I'd like to get through the rest of the committee reports because I do have a motion on behalf of one of the committees, so. June, you were speaking.
The Sustainability Committee met as usual last month. There was some general discussion about recycling and trash, and we're trying to emphasize to both old and new residents, and there'll be a big push during Earth Week. Phil mentioned the initiation of these new 3-part reusable containers, and they were welcomed, and we will do a big publicity on that. And we're also going to ask the Welcome Committee to push trash and recycling with the new residents. I'll send you that report later, please.
Okay, nothing for road, but the benefit fund started to introduce a motion last time, which kind of got tabled. And the motion that was essentially approved in their last meeting, and they'd like us to consider, is that they want to increase their contribution to the Woodland Pond Educational Assistance semi-annually from $2,000 to $3,000. This is something that's been done routinely for several years in the past. And it got sidetracked last time. We thought we maybe wanted to increase it. They're not interested in an increase. They just, and the increase that to the extent that some of our members wanted, they just want to go from 2,000 to 3,000 semi-annually. So that they want to come back again in 6 months for the other 3,000. It actually was an article already in Woodland Life that they proved that at their meeting. Somebody brought that to my attention. So I make this motion, looking for a second.
Okay.
I want to restate the motion to make sure our secretary gets it right. That the council endorses the motion of the benefit fund to increase the benefit fund's contribution to the Woodland Pond Education Association from $2,000 to $3,000 semi-annually. Okay, discussion? No discussion? I'm sorry. Shall we vote?
Yeah.
Okay, in favor? Bill, thank you very much. The benefit fund appreciates that. Tom, you have something from the financial review?
Yes, it was well attended. Key points were talking about the milestones as we get into the renovation approval process. There's a public hearing on March 17th at the Village Hall where they're expecting no issues. An audit was done. An audit was done and was fast tracked, so we would have this for the Ulster County or Ulster Capital Resources Corporation, who funds our who approves our request for tax exempt funding. There's also part of this process is a submission to the executive forecast audit for projected funds over 5 years, and this is required by the Department of Financial Services and Department of Health. Fortunately, both these agencies seem to be very slow to respond, and but they're going to look ways to part them along. Also, management has begun steps to prepare submission for a corporate bond rating from Fitch. This is viewed as necessary because having a bond rating or having a corporate rating allows us to gain lower loan rates on our fundings. And as Michelle and Dave mentioned, they have begun their succession planning and risk management. And that will all be completed and presented to the board in June. Molly, here's my report.
Questions for Tom?
Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of the committee stuff. You have to ask for 1 minute to say something about political affairs, correct?
No, yeah, just, I think last time it was requested that I report with the Political Affairs Committee. We had our first meeting of the year, a couple of days ago. We are just going over the procedures, trying to streamline how do we organize meetings. Also, we added 2 new members, Jay Mandel, that was sitting here, and Norman Breyer. So right now the committee consists of 4 people. That's it. Any questions?
No, but thank you. I'm glad you're active and we can get some new blood in there too. That's good. Okay. The only other thing is an announcement to the once vast but now select audience. The upcoming council connections, we have Ina and the Interfaith Committee on the 20th of March next month on a date to be announced. We'll have something to do with sustainability. You'll probably be doing those.
March is already announced. For May.
Yes, I'm done in April right now.
Oh,
April. And then in May, Matt Romer, your fitness instructor, is going to be interviewed by Joe Costantino. Probably, I don't know what date.
it's on the 3rd week, not the 1st.
So, whatever.
I'll
The
send
The third, yeah, it'll be announced, but just to catch you up on that. I have nothing else. I thank you all for your patience. I think there was a couple things that came up today we might want to consider. I think it was the fellow sitting over here, Tal, is his name? Tad, sorry. He made a suggestion that maybe when we know we're gonna have a lot of speakers on a particular topic that Michelle is also gonna address, to defer the ears till that point in the meeting. I think that's a pretty good suggestion, so that when Michelle could hear firsthand everything everybody had to say, I'm open to that. And another thought too, but I can't keep 2 thoughts going at the same time. And maybe if somebody in that group of people is gonna talk, could just give us a heads up, we could accommodate our agenda. I don't have anything else. I hope to see you all at 2 o'clock. Oh, second year session, beg your pardon. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
2 o'clock. Classroom. A conference. Yes, conference room. I'm sorry, thank you. We won't have microphones, we'll just have to talk.
Yeah, you better hope you don't get a big crowd, that place gets crowded fast.
Well.
No, it's okay, I'm just saying.
You gotta take attendance there too.
Go on.
Sure, that works.
It's gonna be shorter as long as it needs to be, I don't.